A sale bill can write a price beside a woman's name, but it cannot explain why a sealed paper hidden in a dead man's desk called that same woman his child. This is the story of Mara, a young enslaved woman on a South Carolina rice estate marked for auction after the death of Thomas Cresswell, the man whose household had owned her since birth. In the inventory book, Mara was listed between a mule team and a sugar chest. Female 21 house labor, $475. But when Cresswell's private papers were opened, the clerk found one line that made every buyer in the room step back. Mara, born to Celia, is mine. This is a work of historical fiction, shaped by documented realities of slave inventories, estate appraisals, probate disputes, hidden family ties, coerced silence, and the dangerous power of a name placed where a family did not want it found. The first notice came before the heat rose off the marsh. It was pinned beside the smokehouse with a brass tack, low enough for every eye to reach it and high enough to remind everyone who had put it there. No bell rang, no speech was made. Only a piece of paper appeared in the morning damp, carrying the names of people who might be gone before another moonrise. By then, everyone on Laurel Bend already knew Thomas Cresswell was dead. The big house had been shut for 2 days. White cloth hung over the parlor mirror. Horses stood saddled near the lane. Men came from Charleston with black coats, leather satchels, and voices that softened only when they spoke to one another. In the quarters, nobody mistook that silence for peace. Death in a planter's house did not stop the machinery. It started the counting. Acres of rice land, cypress boats, silver spoons, coils of rope, household chairs, notes owed to a merchant, interest on a debt, seed sacks, livestock, and then people. Mara stood behind the kitchen steps when she heard her name read from the notice. Not spoken read. The difference mattered. A spoken name could carry memory. It could carry warning. It could carry love. A written name on an estate sale sheet carried weight in another direction. It pulled a body toward strangers. Mara. No mother beside it. No birth story. No room where she first cried. No woman who had wrapped her in a torn linen cloth. Just Mara, placed under the heading, household and field property to be sold for settlement of debts. In the kitchen, Aunt Dinah looked up from a bowl of cornmeal. She had raised Mara after Celia disappeared from the household roles. She had never told the whole story, only pieces, because in that world the full truth could become a weapon in the wrong hand. What did they put beside my name? Mara asked. Dinah wiped meal from her fingers and did not turn toward the window. Enough to tempt a man who thinks numbers are truth. Mara understood. Thomas Cresswell's eldest son, Gideon, wanted cash quickly. His stepmother wanted the house secured. Creditors wanted their notes satisfied. A plantation estate could be dressed in mourning and still act like a market. Across the slaveholding South, estate records often placed enslaved people beside animals, furniture, tools, crops, and debt schedules. On the page, it looked orderly. In life, it could mean a mother torn from a child, a husband sold across water, a name shortened until even kinship became harder to prove. That was the first cruelty of those papers. They did not need to shout. They only needed ink. A few minutes later, Gideon Cresswell crossed the yard with the overseer and the auction agent. Gideon wore a black armband, but grief sat on him badly. He did not look like a son mourning a father. He looked like a man impatient with an obstacle. He stopped near the kitchen path and unfolded the sale bill. 2 men from the lower fields, 1 woman from the laundry, the carpenter's boy. 3 children from the nursery yard, Mara from the house. The last name came out thinner, not softer. Thinner, as if he wanted to spend as little breath on it as possible. Mara kept her hands still at her sides. Dinah's shadow shifted behind her, But the older woman did not step forward. Too much concern could be noticed. Too much love could be used. In a place built on ownership, even tenderness learned to hide its face. "The sale begins after the papers are read," Gideon said. "No one leaves the grounds." After the papers are read, Mara held on to that phrase. She had seen the household ledger before. Once, years earlier, Cresswell had left it open on the library desk while she carried in a tray. Her own name had been written in a hand so careful it felt cruel. Mara, female house, 21. Sound, 475. She remembered staring at the dollar mark longer than the rest. Not daughter, not child, not Celia's value. But she remembered other things too. Thomas Cresswell never let visiting men look at her too long. His wife Lydia stiffened whenever Mara entered the dining room. Gideon watched her with a dislike too personal to be ordinary command. And Dinah never let anyone call her girl. Mara, Dinah would correct. Every time. As if one complete name could hold a door shut. By mid-morning, the lawyer's carriage came down the oak lane, wheels hissing through wet sand. The house seemed to inhale around it. Mara was told to remain in the kitchen, so she stood beside the brick hearth, while steam rose from a black pot, and the front rooms filled with men who believed a desk could decide what a life was. "What is in those papers?" she asked. Dinah did not answer quickly. Instead, she reached into the hidden pocket sewn inside her apron, and drew out a small packet wrapped in brown thread. She placed it in Mara's palm. Inside was a scrap of pale linen, no larger than a man's hand, with a single blue bead sewn into one corner. Mara looked up. "What is this?" "From the night you were born." The kitchen changed shape around the words. The younger girls at the wash basin stopped moving. Outside, a crow called from the fence. From the front room came the low scrape of chairs. Mara closed her fingers around the cloth. "My mother, Celia," Dinah said. She worked the laundry tubs until the skin cracked across her hands. Quiet when she had to be, not quiet when it mattered. Mara swallowed. "And Cresswell?" Dinah looked toward the hall before she answered. "He knew." 2 words. That was all it took for the house to grow colder. Mara had heard enough whispered beginnings to understand what Dinah did not say. A young enslaved woman, a white master, a birth the household wanted hidden, a child kept close enough to control but never acknowledged loudly enough to protect. "If he knew," Mara said, "why am I in his book?" Dinah's face tightened. "Because a man can know the truth and still choose the lie that serves him." From the front room, Gideon's voice rose, hard and sudden. Then it stopped. Dinah tilted her head. "He has found something he does not like." "What?" Dinah's eyes moved to the closed library door. "A dead man's paper can trouble the living, if the living built their comfort on silence." A clerk came to the kitchen doorway. "Bring the household inventory." Everybody in the room seemed to hear the same second meaning, inventory. That was the book where breath became property, where age became estimate, where skill became price, where mothers vanished unless they affected value. A girl named Ruthie stepped in from the yard with a bucket in both hands, and froze when she saw Mara's face. "They reading names?" she whispered. Mara nodded. "My brother is on that bill," Ruthie said. "They put Ben. His name is Benjamin." Dinah looked at both of them. "Then remember Benjamin." Ruthie's mouth trembled. "Will remembering stop them?" "No," Dinah said, "not by itself." Then her voice sharpened. "But forgetting helps them." The clerk returned, impatient now. "The book." The overseer brought it under one arm, as casually as if he carried a sack of meal. Mara watched the ledger pass into the hall. For 21 years, one book had been allowed to say what she was. Now another paper, somewhere behind that door, was about to answer it. The library smelled of tobacco ash, candle wax, and damp wool. Mara had not been invited inside, but the door stood half open, and no one closed it. That was the first sign the room had lost control. The lawyer, Mr. Harrow, sat behind Thomas Cresswell's desk. A county clerk stood beside him with a narrow folio under his arm. Gideon remained near the mantel, one hand locked around a chair back. Lydia Cresswell sat in black near the window, her veil lifted but her face still hidden behind the effort of not looking at Mara. The lawyer read the ordinary items first. Northfield boat landing, 3 draft horses, 2 silver candlesticks, dining table rice barrels, a debt to Fenwick and Sons of Charleston, interest due before harvest. His voice was calm. That calmness hurt more than anger. Anger admitted something was happening. Calm made destruction sound like housekeeping. Then Mr. Harrow turned a page. His mouth changed. Gideon saw it. "What is that?" The lawyer adjusted his spectacles. "A sealed memorandum attached to the will." "My father's private guilt is not part of the estate," Gideon said. "If it disposes of estate property," the lawyer replied, "it is very much part of the estate." Mara did not understand every legal word, but she understood the shift in the room. She understood the auction agent suddenly looking at the floor. She understood Lydia's fingers tightening on her handkerchief until the lace twisted like rope. Mr. Harrow broke the seal. Paper opened with a dry sound. Then he read, "Concerning the young woman called Mara, born in my household to Celia of the laundry, I state what I failed to state in life." The lawyer paused. Gideon stepped forward. "Do not read that aloud." Mr. Harrow looked over his spectacles. "This document bears your father's signature and seal. Then read it to yourself." "No," Mara said. The word came out before fear could stop it. Every face turned. She had spoken from the doorway, not loudly, but the room had been built to make even a quiet word from her sound like trespass. Mara's throat tightened, but she did not lower her eyes. "If it names me," she said, "I will hear it." The silence that followed had teeth. Then Dinah stepped into the hall behind her, not touching her, standing close enough to be counted. Mr. Harrow looked back at the page, and this time he read the line that broke the room open. "Mara, born to Celia, is mine by blood, and shall not be sold as part of my estate." The words struck in pieces. Mara, born to Celia. Mine by blood, not sold. For a moment she felt nothing. Not joy, not relief. Only the terrible weight of hearing a truth spoken 21 years too late. Then she saw the ledger on the desk. Still open. Still waiting. Mara, female, house 21. Sound 470. 2 papers lay before them now. One priced her. One claimed her. Neither had asked her who she was. Gideon recovered first. He was fevered when he signed that. Mr. Harrow looked at the seal. It was witnessed 8 years ago. Lydia closed her eyes. That was when Mara understood. This was not a deathbed mistake. This was a secret the house had known how to keep. Probate records, wills, inventories, and appraisals could expose contradictions the system tried to smooth over. A person might be listed as property in one book, while another paper admitted kinship, a promise, or a special restriction. Those contradictions did not create justice by themselves. Courts often protected property before humanity, but conflict between documents could delay a sale, frighten a buyer, and pull a buried truth into a public room. The auction agent cleared his throat. "I do not purchase a disputed woman." Gideon turned on him. "She is listed. She is disputed." The word did not sound like freedom. It sounded smaller than that, but it stopped the sale from moving. For the first time in Mara's life, the book that priced her had met a paper it could not easily swallow. Gideon pointed at Dinah. "Remove her," She is feeding this insolence. Mr. Harrow looked toward the older woman. Were you present at Mara's birth? Dinah stepped fully into the doorway. I was. Where? In the laundry shed during the storm that flooded the lower path. What was the mother's name? Celia. And did Thomas Cresswell attend? He came before sunrise. Gideon laughed. A short, ugly sound. A kitchen woman's memory is not a record. Dinah's eyes did not drop. No, it is what survives when records are written by the people who need the truth missing. Lydia made a sound then. Not quite a sob. Not quite a protest. Everyone looked at her, but she looked only at the cabinet behind Cresswell's desk. Mara followed her eyes. So did the lawyer. What is in that cabinet? Mr. Harrow asked. Gideon moved too quickly. Family letters. This is a probate reading. They have no bearing. Lydia spoke without lifting her head. Open it, Gideon. For 1 second. The room stopped breathing. Then the key was brought. The cabinet opened with a groan of old hinges. Inside were bundled receipts, plantation accounts, notes from merchants, and a small tin box wrapped in a faded green ribbon. Gideon reached for the bundles. Dinah said one word. Box. His hand froze. Mr. Harrow took it before anyone could stop him. Inside lay a folded baptismal note from a small river chapel, a strip of linen with a blue bead sewn into the corner, and a card bearing one word in Cresswell's private hand. Mara. Not inventory ink, not sale ink, a name written alone. Mara looked down at the cloth in her own hand and understood why Dinah had kept its match. There had been 2 pieces, one hidden in the kitchen, one hidden in the master's desk. The lawyer read silently first. His face did not change much, but Gideon's did. Anger became fear. What does it say? Mara asked. No answer. Even now, with her name on the table, the room tried to decide how much truth she was allowed to receive. So she asked again. What does it say? Mr. Harrow looked at her. It states that Thomas Cresswell knew you were Celia's child and his. It repeats that you were not to be sold. It also sets aside $150 for your maintenance, should the court uphold the instruction. $150. A sum that could not buy back 21 years. A sum that could not bring Celia back into the room. A sum that sounded large to the law and small to the life it had failed. Mara did not thank the dead man. She had no reason to. A late confession is not mercy just because it arrives with a seal. But it was evidence, and evidence could slow a machine outside. The yard had started to fill with whispers. The benches were set. The buyers had gathered. The people named on the sale bill waited with their eyes fixed on the house. They did not know the words read inside. They only knew the auction had not begun. That was enough to make every heart listen. Gideon demanded the sale continue without Mara. Mr. Harrow closed the tin box. The matter must be reviewed. You do not decide that. The court will. Until then, she cannot be lawfully included in today's sale. The auction agent stepped back from the door. I will not risk title on a contested name. A contested name. Mara held that phrase like a coal in her mouth. It burned, but it gave light. Then Ruthie appeared near the kitchen passage, eyes wide. Benjamin? She mouthed. Mara looked at the open ledger. Benjamin had been written as Ben. Ruthie's mother had been listed on a separate page, under laundry labor, with no family tie marked at all. If one name in the book had been shortened until truth disappeared, what else had been trimmed away? What other kinship had the ledger made convenient? What other promise had been tucked into a cabinet because it troubled the price? Mara turned to Dinah. The book is being questioned. Dinah nodded. Then every page can feel the weight of it. This was not a miracle. The law had not become kind because one sentence embarrassed a family. Buyers still stood in the yard. Creditors still wanted money. Gideon still held power. The people on the sale bill still faced the same danger they had faced at sunrise, but the machinery had lost its smoothness. That mattered. Smooth cruelty is the easiest cruelty to carry out. By afternoon, the county clerk asked for earlier appraisals. Mr. Harrow requested the plantation birth notes. The auction agent demanded clean title for every person offered. Gideon cursed under his breath and sent men searching through old drawers. Dinah moved through the kitchen with the calm of someone who had waited years for a crack in the wall. She did not make speeches. She gave instructions. Ruthie was to say her brother's full name every time anyone asked. Benjamin, not Ben. Jonas from the boat landing was to tell the clerk that Ruthie's mother had nursed both children after Celia died. The laundry woman was to send word by a fish cart to a black church elder near the river, a man known to remember marriages and births when white papers did not. A stable boy was to watch whether Gideon removed documents from the side office. No running, Dinah said. No shouting. No brave foolishness. Truth has legs, but it must know where to step. Mara stared at her. You planned for this? Dinah looked at the fire. I kept what might be needed. Planning is what free people call it when they have paper. We called it remembering. Near dusk, Gideon found Mara by the pantry door. No one else stood close enough to hear him. You think his blood makes you one of us? The old fear rose through her body. It had been trained into her. Fear of a man's lowered voice. Fear of a hallway with no witness. Fear of anger dressed as ownership. But today, another feeling rose beside it. Not safety, never that. A colder steadiness. Mara looked at him. No. Gideon's mouth tightened. She said, It proves your book was never big enough to hold the truth. Before he could answer, Mr. Harrow entered the hall. Mr. Cresswell, the clerk requires the original inventory pages. Gideon turned away. For the first time, he was the one being summoned by paper. That evening, the auction benches remained unused. Not all the names were spared, not all the danger passed, but Benjamin's sale was delayed because his family tie had been omitted from the working copy of the list. 2 children from the nursery yard were held back until the clerk could compare ages and maternal names. Mara's sale was suspended entirely pending review of the will, the memorandum, and the chapel note suspended. That word did not open a gate, but it shut one for the night. And sometimes the first mercy a family receives is not freedom. It is time. Morning came gray over the marsh. The big house no longer looked like a house in mourning. It looked like a house under judgment. Men came with papers. Old account books were stacked on the library table. The county clerk scraped sand across fresh ink. Mr. Harrow read until his eyes reddened. Gideon paced from window to desk as if movement could change what had already been written. Lydia Cresswell stayed upstairs until noon. When she finally descended, she carried a small packet in both hands. No one spoke as she placed it on the desk. Inside was a letter from Celia, not signed with a flourish, not written in a hand the law would honor easily. Someone else had written the words for her, but the mark beneath them was hers. A careful X beside the name Celia. Mr. Harrow read it aloud. It did not accuse. That made it worse. It named the child. It named the night. It named Dinah as witness. It stated that Thomas Cresswell had taken the matching blue bead from the birth cloth and promised the child would never be sold from the household. Mara felt Dinah's hand settle lightly against her back. Not to hold her up, to remind her she had witnesses. Gideon said, A slave woman's mark proves nothing. The county clerk, who had said little all morning, looked up. It proves there is another document. A thin answer, a legal answer. But in that room, thin was enough to cut. By the end of the week, the court order came from town. It did not declare the world changed. It did not punish Thomas Cresswell for the years he let his own child live as property. It did not make Lydia's silence harmless. It did not make Gideon's rage disappear. The order was narrow. Mara was not to be sold in the estate auction, while the will and memorandum were under review. The $150 named in the paper was to be held aside. The disputed inventory pages were to be examined before further sale. Narrow, incomplete, late, but real. The sale Gideon wanted did not happen cleanly. Benjamin remained with Ruthie while the pages were reviewed. 2 other names were delayed long enough for relatives from a neighboring estate to send word. Not everyone was saved. This story does not become honest if it pretends paper suddenly grew a conscience. But a lie that had lived comfortably for 21 years was forced to stand in daylight. And daylight changed what could be done quietly. On Mara's last evening before she was moved from the auction yard to the protection of a court-appointed hold, she went to the kitchen. Dinah sat near the hearth, the same place she had sat through storms, births, beatings, hunger, and secrets that would have crushed a weaker heart. Mara placed the blue beaded cloth in her hands. "You kept this all those years." Dinah looked at it for a long time. "I kept one half," she said. "The other half waited in the desk of the man who was too cowardly to say your name while breath was still in him." Mara's eyes stung. "What was she like?" "Celia." Mara nodded. Dinah's face softened, but only a little. Grief had lived in her too long to perform itself for anyone. She was quiet when quiet kept her alive. "But when she held you," she said. Mara, like the name, belonged to no book. Outside, men carried away the unused auction benches. The sound of wood scraping through dirt came through the open door. Ruthie ran up the kitchen steps before dark. "Benjamin is still here," she said. Dinah looked at her. "Say why." Ruthie stood straighter. "Because his name is Benjamin." Mara looked past them to the yard where the sale bill had hung that morning, curling now at the edges from damp air. A person could be written into a ledger as property. A person could be priced by men who never asked what had already been stolen. A person could be hidden inside a house that knew the truth and preferred the profit of silence. But sometimes a name survived where power forgot to search, in an old woman's memory, in a torn piece of linen, in a chapel note, in a sealed paper no son wanted read aloud. And once that name forced the ledger to answer, it could not be buried the same way again.